Daniel, welcome. Thanks for coming here and chatting with us today. I want to let everyone know this is Daniel. Daniel works at Amazon as a solutions architect manager. And how long have you been there for, Daniel?
Next month will be 4.5 years. So
Nice, nice. That's just 3 to 5. I hear is the seniority
yeah,
initially.
at 5 years you get what's called a yellow badge, and then so when you first start, you can tell how long somebody's been at Amazon by the color of their badge. So I'm a blue badge now. After 5 years, you get to be a yellow badge. 10 years, you get red,
Nice,
and then I forget the color progression after that.
cool. Um, Yeah, so today I think one of a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about. I know you're really interested in, I've already seen some of your talks and some of your content around healthcare. So I'm really excited to hear and learn a bit more about that, learn about the current state of technology within that industry, the position that Amazon have placed themselves and the offerings and what you're seeing out there. I want to also hear from you about how you got into Amazon and the career progression that you've had there, the um, your personal history. I'm really excited about learning about that as well. So maybe we can start there with your how you got into Amazon. A little bit about your background and how you end up being where you are today.
Sure. Well, I get asked this a few times. I'm a hiring manager, so a lot of people ask me about how I got started at AWS, and I think it's kind of funny because the vast majority of my career, I was always working in startups. So I was in very small organizations. You know the CEO. You're talking on a daily basis, and then I had been a manager in the past, and I'd had some bad experiences like being a manager. I also had a bad experience working at a larger company, so I had pretty much told myself I never really want to work for a big company again. I definitely do not want to be a manager again. And now we sit here today, and I'm working for Amazon, which I think most would consider to be a pretty large company, and I'm a manager at Amazon. So it has been quite a career progression, but what I found is like I fit really well with the leadership principles that Amazon has, and really like embraced the way that they do things, and I
Mhm.
and I really am a strong believer in it. So
Mm.
I'm really happy there, looking to grow my career there for a long period of time, and yeah. So I mean, happy to get into details about like whatever you want to know as far as like my early days in career and kind of ended up. But I can tell you, I was not recruited
Mm.
by AWS. A lot of people that we get are actually contacted by our recruiters. I was actually one of those exceptions that I just went out and I think I was on LinkedIn one day and I saw this job description and it was talking about healthcare and it was talking
Mm.
about the cloud. And at my last job, I had just been starting to use AWS for a few things, and I just thought, hey, like this is what does it hurt to just like submit my application and send it off, and I did, and I waited a couple months, and then out of nowhere, like one day, I just thought my resume had just gone into some black hole somewhere. It's like I was like, I'm never going to hear anything from them, and yeah, I got contacted by a recruiter, and then went through the hiring process, and here we are now today.
So you didn't have a contact initially in. You applied and the system just leveled up your application to someone to actually look at it and schedule an interview with you and so on.
Yep, exactly.
Wow.
That's the way that it happened. I've learned a lot more since then. I was probably a bit more naive back then. I've learned how great it is to like have a strong LinkedIn profile now.
Mm.
Um, I think that's one of the key things to be
Mm.
noticed by recruiters is to have a good LinkedIn profile, or at least a place where people can like go and see the work that you built. I didn't have any of that, so I to a certain extent I feel a little bit lucky that like I was that if I was doing it again today, I'd probably do things different.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the LinkedIn profile is something that that and the GitHub profile are the
Yes.
two things that I find quite helpful as a hiring manager to go in, take a look, and get you interested in the person and see the work they've done and like, hey, this is not just a piece of paper, right? Like here's a person behind it from a technical point of view, and then you get to meet the person actually
Oh yeah.
when you bring in.
I can tell you if you have a GitHub repo, on your resume, I will be checking it out before we have a conversation. Even if it's going to be a reach out to have like an informal conversation before like a phone screen, I will have visited that GitHub repo. I will have poked around. I will have like looked and seen what the person had built, and then I'll bring it up. And
Mm,
I think it really for candidates, I think it means a lot that that
yeah.
people are taking time to look into it. But it's I mean, to be honest, it's not me like trying to be, it's nice. I really want to learn about the people who are interested and kind of see what they've built, and it kind of gives you an idea of, what kind of ideas they've come up with, and what kind of things that they've been thinking about doing that they think would be helpful. People don't build things for no reason, right? They
Mm-hmm.
usually have a reason why they put something together. It's for a project, or it's for a
Mm-hmm.
problem, or for something they think that they would like to solve, or make somebody's life easier. And I'm just,
Yeah.
interested to learn more about what they've done.
Can you give me an example of if we were looking at GitHub, if you're looking at someone's GitHub repo? We work with a lot of folks that are transitioning in, so they may not have 10 years or 8 years of experience um, using AWS. But what are some projects that you have found in candidates' profile that you were like, wow, this really stands out? Maybe one or two examples of work that stood out to you and perhaps was a motivator for you to interview that person,
Um, I you
or
know
or type of projects
I'm
generically.
struggling to think of anything specific. What I can say is it depends, right? Because we have candidates that come from very diverse backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
We I guess the first thing I would say is to become a solutions architect at AWS. This might surprise a lot of people.
Mm,
We're not required to have AWS experience. Like we have a very robust training program, but we do expect solutions architects to have a breadth of knowledge around like different technology domains, because a lot of those transfer over from, from me, somebody who's a bit older who started on premises. I was used to racking and stacking servers, and I was used to like actually, working with like physical servers and things like that, and then eventually became like VMware. But it kind of came down to that, just that breadth of knowledge. I will say it's beneficial to have the AWS knowledge. Makes your
mm-hmm.
onboarding a lot easier, and it makes it a lot faster, and probably more pleasant experience. But when it comes to like a GitHub repo, what I'm looking for is this might seem kind of obvious, but like have a good like readme.md. Like
Mm-hmm.
explain what you are doing, explain the problem you're solving, like kind of walk me through what's being done. If it's just a code repo that just just has just code in it, and there's not like a readme that kind of tells me what it's
Mm,
doing, and then if you actually have good comments in your code that are talking about like this is what this is doing, so that like I understand that. So I mean, I would just say that it's it's helpful because it lets me kind of understand like what the thought process behind it, and then how well you are helping other people understand things. One of the most important parts of being a solutions architect is being able to describe like complex technical concepts to non-technical users. We interact a lot with like business leaders, right? Like if you're talking to a CEO of a company, they don't care about the difference between like S3 infrequent access, S3
mm,
standard, S3 glacier instant
mm-hmm.
retrieval, S3 one zone express, like one of the many flavors of S3 that we have. What they care about is the business value that is going to bring to them. How is that going to help them reach their business objectives? So a lot of times, like just looking at how documentation is written, it gives you an idea of if somebody has that capability
Mm,
to kind of like make it easy to understand, like what's the problem I'm trying to solve here? What am I trying to do? So I that probably doesn't answer your question very well, but it kind of gives you an idea of like what I'm looking for. I think that solutions architects in general are a unique breed. It's because you have to have that combination of technical skills along with business acumen. We
mm-hmm.
are we are a technical role, but we fall under the sales organization. So
Yeah.
we're going to be interacting not just with the people who are delivering, we're also going to be talking to those decision makers and business leaders who may not have that technical depth. And if you, as an SA, just go into a conversation and it's just all technical, you're going to lose your audience, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to keep that audience.
No, that actually answers the question quite well. So it's a GitHub profile with some project in there, and within that project, a good README
Yep.
that describes business value and doesn't have only specs for the service, right?
Yep.
It's a good description of that, and well documented code, right?
Yes.
So that's especially if you're reading multiple of those, right? That having I suppose if you're looking at several repos, kind of getting the README, you get a good idea what it is without having to understand the entire project before you actually even know what it does. Probably creates a lot of it makes it a lot easier for you,
Yeah.
right?
And
Translates to, like you said, the business conversation.
and I don't really have a software development engineering background, so it could be bad code, it could be great code. I'm probably not really going to know. We do have we have some SA managers who would be SDEs, in prior experience that might actually go in there and investigate that. But to me, that's actually not
Mm-hmm.
important. If you're going to be a solutions architect, like you need to have some capabilities. Like I can do some Terraform and some cloud formation. I started dabbling with CDK a little bit, but like don't ask me to like go write a Lambda function. Like I'm not going to be able to do it, right?
Cool, right on. And I think that comes to some of Amazon's leadership expectation and attributes, right? Is being able to, yeah, the obsession with the customer, right? Making
Yep.
sure and communicating that actual value as opposed to technical benefits, perhaps. Like I think that translates well when you that's an interesting thing I hadn't thought about, is how does someone's ability to communicate with a non-technical customer, how can you sort of predict that from actual projects they wrote, right? So I think that the GitHub repo with good comments and a good README, that seems to be, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some things that you expect, maybe some soft skills when you're interviewing someone, or even when you're looking at a resume? I'm not sure how you're able to determine that, but what kind of non-technical attributes are you also looking for as you're interviewing to fill a specific position?
Um, I think again, this might be a surprise to some people. Whenever you interview at Amazon, the majority of your interview experience is not about your technical accomplishments.
Mm,
There's 16 leadership principles at Amazon,
mm-hmm.
and those are a fundamental part of what it means to work at Amazon or to work at AWS. And I would, part of my belief in those leadership principles is what led me to become a bar raiser, which is a role that I will support other interviews, even outside of my family, where I'll support other, like, as somebody's interviewing for Project Kuiper, like I might be pulled in to interview that candidate. I have no knowledge about like what it takes to build ground stations or to put antennas into space to provide, networking. Like I have no clue about that. But my responsibility is to make sure that the candidates are exemplified leadership principles. You can tell some of that a a resume. I would say to a very
Mm,
minor extent. I think it comes out a lot more inside the interview because it comes out the way that we ask the questions. Our questions are going to be specifically around like things that you have done in your career. And you can be earlier career, you can be middle career, late career. Like if you've done examples that fall within those are those stories that we want to hear, and those are where we make those decisions. So those are I would say those are. I mean, I wouldn't say those are some of those are skills, right? Some leadership principles can be learned. There's, I don't want to get into like the internal bar raiser debates around like
sure.
what are leadership people are just born with.
Uh,
What are the ones that can be learned? What are the ones that can be trained? But I think some of
that
them
does
are.
seem like a really interesting topic, though.
It is an interesting topic. I
Yeah.
mean, one of our we have a leadership principle called earn trust.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people that say like this behind customer obsession. There's, I think, a large, you know, population that would say that's the second most important leadership principle. Because if your customer can't trust you, or if the people you work with can't trust you, like, that's that right there is a deal breaker, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of those comes down to questions of like, how did you handle it? Like if, you came to it with a great idea to your manager, they didn't support you.
Mm-hmm.
And to see how people handle that situation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that'll tell you a lot about how that person's going to be, how they're going to work with other people, how they're going to be a part of the team. We work in really small teams at Amazon. There's this concept of a two pizza team that a manager should really have no more people reporting to them than that you could feed with two large pizzas.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have these very we have very spread out teams that are there. It's not like one manager managing 50 people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a manager managing 6 to 8 people.
Mm-hmm.
I would say is a lot more the norm. So you're working in a tight knit organization where you're talking to your people on a regular basis, and so it's important to have that trust with them. But yeah, learn and be curious is one of the, I would say, really important ones for solutions architects. I mean, if you look at AWS, like I've been there 4.5 years, the number of services that we had when I started, like compared to the number of services we have now, I think in this year there was something like 3,336 new features and services added to AWS.
Wow.
Just this year.
Wow.
So it's impossible for me to keep up with all of those. It's impossible for anybody to keep up with all of them. But you have to have that desire to continue to learn about what is new, what has come out and what could be beneficial to our customers. So if you don't have that thirst for knowledge, that thirst for learning, you'll get stagnant, you'll get stale on your knowledge. So that's I think a really important at AWS and Amazon. Things are always moving fast. If you don't keep up to date, you're just gonna fall behind.
So you mentioned too, you earn trust and learn to be curious.
Learn
right?
and be curious.
Learn and be
yes.
curious, right? Earn trust and learn and be curious. The earn trust one, for me personally, I think in my career, it took me some time to really appreciate it. I think when I graduated, I briefly told you this story. I was like, I'm going to build something, just kind of heads down, and I'm going to put it out there, and everyone's going to come, right?
Yep.
I won't have to do any talking. I don't need anyone to do sales or marketing. I just need to have a good technical working product, and that didn't work out. So I learned to be humble early on, and I think as I progress in my career, and I've been involved in multiple teams in multiple size company. Large company, small startup, medium. The trust aspect of it, I've really learned to prioritize, especially in the beginning. When I join the team, what I need to first focus on is making sure that I can trust the team and that the team can trust me. So instead of really show off my technical abilities and coming in and trying to do all these changes, I've learned to take a step back, at least for a few months, and kind of get a survey of the land and really earn trust, right? First, the human aspect of it. And then, okay, now that I understand the dynamics of the team, I have a bit more depth into why things are the way they are. Now I can present perhaps large change proposal for larger changes, even, right? Like bigger changes, maybe even beyond my position. But learning to take a step back and first get an understanding of why things are the way they are is something that took me a couple jobs before I came to that realization how important trust is, right? To earn it, and how hard it is and easy to lose, right? So hard to earn and easy to lose.
It's a delicate balance because when you're new somewhere, I need to prove my worth. I need to show that they made a great decision.
Yeah.
And if you're not, you're right. If you just come in as an agent of change without really having that trust of the people who are going to be responsible for implementing that change, that does become difficult. So yeah, it's one of those. I think it's one of those lessons that probably a lot of people have gone through in their lives.
Yeah, definitely took me some time. So for someone in the beginning of their career, right? Let's say someone works in retail and they've taken some classes. Maybe they have an associate's solutions architect certification, so they have a good feeling for it. But it's still that's just something they just started learning.
Right.
Um, and what would be the steps that you advise them to do? They already got that certification. They have some small, simple projects they have a repository with something simple while they were studying for that certification, and now they're out in the world looking for a position. What is something you think they should do? You already mentioned LinkedIn, but beyond that, maybe a couple options that they can do to get the attention of the recruiter, and once they are hired, to do well once they have that first day in the job.
Yeah, I think, if somebody's looking at a career change, and I think, there's a lot of different programs Amazon has that helps people
Mm,
with that if they're interested in being at Amazon. I'm not saying you have to come work for
mm-hmm,
AWS or Amazon, but I think if you really want to go work anywhere, that you do need to have some body of work that shows that you're capable of doing it. So I think what you're mentioning is important. That um, a person could very easily probably go get. I'm not gonna say easily. Like a person who put effort and work into it
mm-hmm,
could go and get a certified cloud practitioner and probably an associate solutions architect without ever having actually
mm-hmm,
built anything,
mm-hmm,
because a lot of those questions are theoretical, right? They're like, a
mm-hmm,
customer has this problem,
mm-hmm,
they want to solve it. What are the right AWS services to solve that problem? There's a difference between knowing that and being able to like demonstrate it.
mm-hmm,
So I think what you mentioned is, if you haven't had the opportunity to like get a job to where you're actually able to demonstrate success at that, and you're trying to come in fresh, then having a project that you've built, something that you can show that you build, demonstrates that ability to do something in practice. So I would say that that's one of those really important aspects of it, because then there's that comfort level as a hiring manager of knowing that, okay, this person has the foundational knowledge and that, like, I guess the book smarts, but also can deliver results, which I just said a leadership principle. That's one of the Amazon LPs, deliver
the
results,
results.
right? It's like there's a difference between knowing something and being able to do it. Like I my daughter's actuator on her door was broken, and so I watched some YouTube videos like, how do I change this door actuator, because I'm cheap and I don't want to go to the dealership to have them change it. So I ordered the part off of Amazon, watched some videos. Well, it's just me watching those videos and me actually getting out there to do it. And you know what I did? I messed it up the first time. I installed it. I thought I had done a great job. I could unlock the doors, but you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to actually. There's this metal bar that comes down and connects the handle that actually lets you open the door from the outside. I didn't put that back together right. So my daughter comes out. She's like, I can't open the door from the outside. I can only open from the inside. And so realized what my mistake was. Ripped the door back apart, and I ended up fixing it. But there's a difference between just like saying, me describing to you the process after watching that video,
Yeah.
and actually be able to do it. So that's maybe that's like a stretched example, but
I like that example, and it reminds me of a quote from one of my favorite movies that I just watched with my daughters, The Matrix. And there's a scene where Morpheus is coming to talk to Neo. It's at the end of the first movie, and Neo just rescued Morpheus. Have you seen the
I,
trilogy?
yes, and I thought you were going to describe the kung fu fight where he's
Uh,
like, "Don't think you can hit me, like actually hit me," when they're doing the kung fu.
Yeah, the one I was thinking about, that's a good one as well. The one I was thinking about is really towards the end, after he rescued Morpheus. He walks to Morpheus, like, you're definitely the one, right? Like, feeling that in his mind, and Neo walks him, like, lower his head, and then the Oracle, and then Morpheus looks at him and says, Neo, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. So there's a big distinction between just knowing, right, reading it, getting the test done, right, or watching the videos, and actually doing what you need to do to get the result, right?
Yes.
So I certainly feel that's an important aspect of it. And at Magical, one of the classes we have, this is a more advanced class. It's intermediate advanced. We have projects that we present to them. And we help them work through it. So it's actual implementations of real world problems I've either seen in my career or someone brought in. or they have seen in the past, or we find small projects that they can work on and deliver, and that includes actually putting putting some things together, right? Setting up a VPC, maybe creating a functional CloudFormation stack that does something useful for them, or maybe it's something simple, right? Setting up a Lambda function that checks for S3 changes, a bucket change, right? And what kind of changes they were, when they were added, what does that do to cost, right? And maybe at
Right.
the end of the month, there's a report. So that's small, doable, and interesting.
Yeah, and beneficial.
Yeah, and
Right.
it might be beneficial. Someone might be really wanting to keep a really close eye on their costs before they're actually charged at the end of the month, right? So you could have a weekly report on that. That's one that we've done in the past, on someone's request. They were very, very picky about their cost. So instead of just talking about, hey, there's, you can use Glacier for this, you can use Standard for this, we were just like, hey, here's the actual cost, right? That goes back to what you're talking about, speaking with a business person instead of talking about the name of the services, just saying, here's what we're doing to actually address your concern of cost, for example, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like, again, one of those important parts about being a solutions architect is knowing what is important to the customer. If a customer is very cost conscious,
Yeah.
then the way you would make a solution for them would be different if somebody's priority was resiliency.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Or
and
so
access, right? Or
right.
whatever it may be for the particular.
Yeah. So you have trade offs in all those areas, and that's
Yeah.
I think one of those important things that it is. So
For sure.
I think that your scenarios make a lot of sense. Like I think that if you when you're doing these projects, if you're like, hey, your customer's most important concern is that this is highly available, right? They want the most amount of uptime as possible, or your customer wants to do this for the least amount of cost. The availability is not as much of a priority for them, to see the ways they might architect things differently.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. That's I think that's really helpful for our company, Magical. We help folks, like we mentioned, from the beginning to intermediate. We
Yep.
haven't graduated any advanced customers yet, and we're also learning ourselves a lot, right? Myself included, of course. And really excited about a bunch of the offerings and so many opportunities and so many services. And I think being introduced to that, talking to people like yourself, speaking with you, getting to go to the meetups. That's one thing we didn't talk about. The user groups.
Right.
I think those are really helpful as well. I found them awesome, right? That's where we met.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a really great way, I believe, as well, for someone at any stage in their career, really, to participate in those user groups, get value out of them, learning about new services, which brings me to healthcare, I think, here, which is the presentation I saw you go over with someone else on your team, right?
Right.
How'd you get to healthcare? Like, where are you at with that, and how are things going in that space from your point of view?
So I'll answer that question. I want to just take a step back and say one of those, especially for people that are taking your classes and looking to change industries. Those user groups are a great way to network with AWS people, with other people that are using the cloud in the industry. You get to meet different types of roles at AWS. There's technical account managers that are a big part of those user groups, along with SAs and other types of people. So, and Google Cloud has the same user group. So I think that's another great mechanism for like trying to make those connections and do that networking to get the industry. As far as my journey into healthcare goes, it was by accident. To be honest with you, when I first got into IT, which was funny because I didn't think you could have a career in IT. Like when I was in high school, I loved messing around with computers. I didn't think you could actually have a job. I thought it was a hobby. And so,
That's the best, right?
so I found myself, looking for a job one day, and then somebody knew this person who was starting the small little dial-up internet service provider, and I was like, well, hey, computers are fun. I'll give this a shot. And so I was working with them, and then I was then contracted out to a couple of different organizations. One of them was a company that did downhole survey equipment for oils oil wells. I was in Texas at the
Wow.
time, and then another part I was then contracted out with a company called International Radiology Group out of Dallas, Texas, and I was worked my morning at the place that did the oil equipment, and I'd work my afternoons at the radiology group, and they both both companies wanted to hire me around the same time, and offers were very similar from both of those companies, and so I just had to make a decision at that
Mm.
point, and it was a lot farther drive to go to the radiology place than it was to go to the place in Fort Worth. I lived in
Mm.
Fort Worth at the time.
Mm.
IRG was in Dallas. It was like an hour commute each day. But I remembered seeing the ups and downs of the oil industry. Like it was
Mm.
either feast or famine. They were either running 24/7 shifts or they were laying people off. And
Wow.
so I thought, hey, like there's probably more stability inside of healthcare. And so I just made the decision to go there. But since then I've really I'm glad that I made that decision because even though I would say most of our customers are what we would call laggards in the technology adoption curve, it's not like fun working with like the digital native businesses and like the people using the latest and greatest services and you know using some of the most advanced features that AWS has. A lot of our customers are still kind of doing lifts and shifts into the cloud,
Mm-hmm.
so it's not like the sexy cloud work, right? That some essays can get to do, but I feel that it's I'm part of the nonprofit organization, part of the public sector. I think that you're very mission driven in that aspect, and I've gotten to see how work that I've done has directly impacted patient lives for better. And I can't stand the sight of blood, but knowing that some of these things that I've been able to do to like help our customers that have actually resulted in positive outcomes for people's lives is a very like good feeling like
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day. So yeah, I've been doing that. I've been every company I've worked for in the last 20 years has in some form or fashion been tied to um, supporting the healthcare industry.
You mentioned you mentioned the user groups, and I want to get back to your how you started with the radiology lab.
Yes.
Um, I do want to ask you a question about the user groups.
Okay.
So I have found, this is me personally, I've looked mostly on meetups, right? Meetup.com. And that's how I found the user group where we met. Specifically for AWS, they seem to be a bit rare.
Define rare.
Maybe once a month or less.
Oh, the AWS
Not the
ones that are
cloud,
done
yeah.
through AWS
Or
are
or even general.
so there's a web page you can go to on AWS's site. They'll show you every city that has user groups that are actually run by AWS.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the majority of major cities in the United States have them. I don't know about the level of activity
Mm-hmm.
outside of the Phoenix user groups, but I would say that you're right. The Phoenix user group is about once a month. There's a DevOps group I know that meets about once a month. I've been
Mm-hmm.
to a couple of their meetings, and there's a couple of other ones around. But you're right. Yeah, they're not. And I don't know if they were more popular in the past than they are now. I think COVID might have a lot to do with the
Yeah, am I still getting picked up?
yes, how rare they are. And I think a lot of those things are just I think they're more effective in person than they are virtually.
Yeah,
So
for
I think it's
sure.
just taking some time. Hopefully, hope that's great feedback. Um, I mean, if you think it would be beneficial for us to have those more often, like I can pass that on to the TAMs I know who organize that. We can work at expanding the number that we do for
Mhm.
sure.
Well, it I'm sure there's some calculus as well on attendance, right? So if you have 5 people attending them, if you do them more often, maybe a little bit not as helpful for Amazon to put them on it versus if you do a little bit more rare, but you actually get 15, 20 people attending, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. But for sure, that's something that I always recommend is the user groups because, like you said, there's networking, there's getting to know new things coming out, um, and just a lot to gain from attending those. So I certainly recommend them, and I attend them myself when I find them for sure. Um,
I wish we had the summits like we used to. I mean, before COVID, the AWS like summits would be in, usually about 10 cities in in the United States, and then after COVID, it's really gone down. I went to the Anaheim summit before I
mm,
joined AWS, and not a bad drive from Phoenix, and
right. Yeah, not far.
it's free for people to go to, so it doesn't cost like reInvent did, and it was amazing. I wish we did more of those.
Huh. Well, if they come back up, I don't think I've attended a summit. I have attended reInvent 3 times, I believe.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
you've been 3 times more than me.
uh, it's yeah, reInvent's fun, for sure. There's a lot there. It's definitely fire hose style, right? For that. You started at the radiology lab.
It wasn't a radiology lab. It was a so the best way I can describe this was before teleradiology was a thing. That
Mm,
I'm aging myself here. But we were what was called a remote reading center. So we would get X-rays FedEx to us overnight.
uh,
So these were obviously not like stat X-rays, right? A lot of these were correctional medical facilities that were doing like intake chest X-rays. There were some local hospitals that would send some non like stat reads to us, and we had this gigantic reading room that had been set up with these walls and walls of light boxes. And so I was responsible for all the technology that supported that operation. So there was a system that did the transcription recording when the radiologist actually had to record the
mm,
reports. We had data entry systems. We had to fax reports out to the to the clients. There was a whole what we call normals reporting system, which is and most chest X-rays are normal, right? Like
yeah.
if you go to the ED, they're going to take a chest X-ray. Most likely, they're not going to find anything. So those are just called normal chest X-rays. So there's no reason for a radiologist to dictate out an entire report saying the heart size is normal, like
Mm,
your lungs are clear. So they would just check a little normal box. It would put out a canned report, and then they would just do it.
mm,
At the end of the day, and then just like so I was managing some databases. The application was written in Microsoft Access, so I had to do a little VBA stuff, and then um, the transcription system was on OS 2 Warp, which I had never used before, and other than that, it was a lot of like Windows NT administration, and then once we started getting into teleradiology, that's when I had to start learning things like, hey, I need to learn how to set up VPNs so we can
mm.
actually connect the radiologist to read, remotely, and started like then, obviously I had to learn about wide area networking, and so you just kind of like grow some of your knowledge through that process.
So did you define variables with them using VB, DIM?
Yes, yes, I did.
My first job out of school was basically a VB shop, and that was interesting. At that point, it was pretty closely C sharp. I don't know how distinct they were in the past, but so that's fun. Obviously, now you're at Amazon, and there's a huge uptick in adoption of automation and AI for a lot that's happening today. Like where does that stand? What are some opportunities? What are some challenges that you're seeing? And what are Amazon's customers really using it for? What's the biggest value that's delivered right now in that space?
For my customers,
Yeah.
if you look at one of the most recent like Becker hospital surveys of what are like clinician burnout and clinician fatigue is one of the top
Mm,
problems that administrators are dealing with.
mm,
For our customers, I think that the biggest benefit to AI and ML, and specifically when we're thinking about generative AI, because I think those are two
mm-hmm,
very different things, is that there's an opportunity for us to help clinicians and decrease the amount of burnout and fatigue that they have.
mm-hmm,
I think one of the unintended consequences of the adoption of the electronic medical record is now that there's a lot less face-to-face human reaction,
mm,
interaction between a clinician and their doctor. in the past, like there used to be scribes that would follow these, physicians around and would take the notes and then would put those into those encounters later. For the most part now, due to just those costs, like that documentation is having to be done by those physicians themselves.
Mm.
So there's like we have a service that was recently released called Health Scribe, which actually can do ambient recording of a clinician and a doctor. And it actually knows who the doctor is and it knows who the patient was. So just like you and I are sitting here, there would be imagine like an echo device that would be listening to our conversation and it would be transcribing it. And you would be asking me about like, hey, how are you feeling, Daniel? And I would tell you, and it would take an entire transcript of that entire conversation. And then it's going to use a couple of our other services that we have, which are called like Amazon Transcribe Medical, which is going to be able to then, take that voice recording, put it into text. It can then get pushed through something called Comprehend Medical, which can find signs and symptoms, can find information about prescriptions. It can it can look at SNOMED, ICD-10 coding, and then it uses generative AI to make a summary of that interaction, and it will create a summary that's actually a billable encounter that could go into like an electronic medical record.
Okay.
So when we think about how much time that could like save a clinician and like how
That's
much,
pretty awesome.
yeah, like how much would decrease their amount of work that they have to put into interacting with an electronic health record, like that can increase the amount of time they can actually sit there and just talk to a patient. I think one of the radiologists I used to work with back in the day, his name was Dr. Tebow, love the guy. He was telling me one time, he was like, if you talk to a patient long enough, they'll tell you like what's wrong. And if you listen more, they'll tell you how to fix it. So because a lot of people usually know themselves the best. And I think that that's something that we've kind of like have lost in healthcare just because of the need to just like all that documentation that they have to do, and they have to turn patients over so fast. So I think that's one way that I think that's a particular service I'm excited about. When I think of medical imaging, I think most people would be surprised to learn they've been using AI/ML for radiology for 10 years now. Like there's literally hundreds of FDA approved algorithms for just about everything. Like, if from doing like, if there's like what I was telling you about some of the work I had done, there's an algorithm that a researcher had done at University of San Diego Health that could recognize pneumonia inside of patients. And when COVID-19 happened, they started realizing that like COVID pneumonia that people were presenting that were potentially like asymptomatic, they like weren't being able to catch them ahead of time. And so they had developed this algorithm that was highly accurate at recognizing the pneumonia that was often correlated with like COVID-19. So they had built this algorithm. They just didn't have a way to deploy it because you need GPUs, right?
Right.
It takes a while to like to procure those things. So the customer reached out. I was a solutions architect at the time, supporting them. They were my customer, and they were like, "Hey, we'd like to deploy this." And one of the great things about the cloud is like we were able to deploy a fully functional pipeline that for every single patient that came in to that medical center, we would send that chest X-ray off into the cloud. It would apply this algorithm and it would send it back as a heat map overlay that with also is like, hey, is this person likely to have COVID like pneumonia? And they were actually able to, they ran it for thousands of patients.
Wow.
And that's where, like I was talking about direct patient care, like they're able to find some patients that were not presenting with pneumonia that were found positive through that algorithm, and we're able to get them treatment faster.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, we've been using AI/ML in radiology for a long time, but I think with generative AI, I think it's going to be really able to expand the areas of medicine that we're going to be able to have like transformative changes in.
So that's something I'm really interested in. I haven't played with is the idea of taking a transcript, doing something interesting with it. Obviously, summarizing. I've used that in different aspects of my life, summarizing long conversations. But if I were to take the transcript of this podcast,
Yep.
right, and I wanted to break it down into, say, give 10 key points that we talked about, the 10 most interesting things, right? Um, it's not healthcare, so I can't just use something off the shelf, right? And it's very subjective because it's important to who? To my audience, right? So I don't know how I would communicate that to, perhaps there's some input I could place, but even like ChatGPT that I've used before for some of this kind of work, there's limit, right,
Right.
on the size of the input. So extracting holistically extracting really valuable information from a 1 hour and a half recording um, is as much work as me just watching it and tagging it, or less, or
I
more.
I think it's less work, but I think for you, what would be important for this, and it is that's the importance of prompt engineering. Because if you're doing a one-shot inference using a large language model, which means you're more or less just giving it a single prompt to like return something to you, you shouldn't ask a large language model like, "Hey, like make a summary of this conversation and tell me what's important to it." What you would want to tell a large language model is you'd want to actually say, I'm a person who's interested in working at AWS. What are the most important things from the conversation? And then there's the context around the question to where the large language model will be a lot more accurate.
How did you learn about the importance of prompt engineering?
So I had heard about the importance of prompt engineering, just as you know, as a theory, and I had played around with it a little bit, like on ChatGPT, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can, depending upon how you ask the question, you can get it to return different results, and a lot of it is around the context of it. Like if you you could ask, you can ask it to return something like in JSON, right?
Yeah.
But then if you want to just actually to return it in JSON, so you could just like copy and paste it and like it'd be a formatted document. You actually did say like, don't give me any additional information except for the JSON. Like you have to you prompt it to that extent. But I think I don't know if I could actually answer like where did I actually learn about it. It was probably just me seeing examples of it, me playing with it myself, and then really getting to see like what a difference it made in like a real use application, which was like what was the example I was going to tell you about if you're
please.
So one of our customers, AWS has a service called Amazon Translate, which lets you say translate from English to French, English to Spanish. There's also large language models that do translation, right? So you can use like I think Jurassic or Claude. I can't remember which one of those LLMs are good at translating. And our customer said, we want to translate the discharge notes into the patient's language that they're in, but we want to know we want to know like that it's accurate, right? Because you don't actually get like confidence scores back when you put something in through a large language model or even through something like Translate. You just like if you're using Google Translate, you're going to put in, it's going to give you out. It's not going to give you a score saying like, hey, I think this is 95% accurate. You have to actually speak the language and understand both languages to understand how accurate it is. So if you are bilingual and like you said something like, hey, translate this discharge summary from English to Spanish, and you get told that to a large language model, it's going to do it, but it's not going to do a very good job of it. If you send what the solutions architect on this learned during that process, that they engineered the prompt to say, you are a doctor who speaks English and Spanish, and you want to take this English discharge note and put it into like Spanish that a patient could understand, it would do a much better job of translating it. Yes. Wow. It did a much better job.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
So you prompt it to say that it also now speaks the second language, right? As opposed to just asking for the translation.
Right.
That is interesting.
So like if you did what's called a RAG, which is resource augmented generation. So like let's say that you wanted to teach a bot to be a nurse practitioner. So you could feed it all of the data that like a nurse practitioner would need to study throughout their, the courses they needed to take. it could take all that input in, and then you would ask it questions as be like, you are a nurse practitioner. A patient has come to you with these
Mm,
symptoms. Like, what is they most likely to have? So then it's knowing to use that source of knowledge that you've trained it on to increase its accuracy.
mm. So I have played around a bit with prompt engineering. I don't think I have done enough, but the example of telling it what you want it to be, I think is a really powerful one, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. What has AI done for you? Really open-ended question here.
Um, I've
Intentionally open-ended.
yeah, it's I would say that. So first of all, I will say I'm a skeptic. I remember when blockchain came out, and
Hmm.
everybody was like,
Oh yeah.
"Blockchain is going to change the world. We've got to find a use for blockchain." Um, and there's like everybody want to talk about blockchain. Like
Yeah,
every customer I go to is like, "How can we use
yeah.
blockchain in radiology? Like, how can we use this?" And I think what we've ended up finding there's blockchain's very useful in certain areas, but it wasn't like this magic, hammer that could is the one tool to to rule them all. So when generative AI came out, I would say skeptical. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is just blockchain 2.0. Um, and I played around with it a little bit, had some fun with it. I I really I enjoyed like making generative AI applications hallucinate. It was like
Oh, that's always
it
fun,
was
right?
one of my favorite things to do. Um, I can think of, I haven't used it a lot like personally. I've I haven't used it to help me write any documents. There's a big writing culture at Amazon. I think that people would
Hmm.
not be impressed if you use generative AI to like write any of your narratives. That'd probably be a
Mm.
big no no. Um, I mean, I don't think I've done anything like significant with it, to be honest with you. I have done things like use Gen AI to argue with my friends, right? For as like
I
so that makes it a lot easier to write convincing arguments. So
Yes, it's always super confident, right, on its answer. I've speaking of arguing with friends, I think one fun use I found is um almost as a counselor, but in a very casual way, because it does understand human motivation in a really interesting way. And I think if it hallucinates there, it's a little bit less of a problem for the use case I'm talking about, because it's really about belief, right? Like the psychological interpretation of a situation, right? So like, hey, this and this and this happened. Um, Here's a situation, this and this happened, and I'm unsure how to respond. What would a um, caring, loving father do, for example, right? So, and then it will tell me, it's like, I'm not going to do that, right? Or it's like, hey, I hadn't thought of that. That's an interesting, so I made my daughters, I have a 10 and a 12-year-old. I think I can bring those points up to her, right? To maybe explain to her why she can't have an all-nighter, right? In a more patient way, right? That's just kind of a casual example. She's constantly asked, "Can I just stay up all night? Right? Can I eat 3 pounds of candy for breakfast?" Not so much anymore that she's 10, but that has been something. So that I found that to be interesting.
yeah, I actually thought of one other thing I use generative AI for that actually might be a use case for it. So when we first released the SageMaker Jumpstart, which allow you to use like third party large language models
Hmm.
inside of your SageMaker notebooks, one of the essays wrote this little like fun like lab for us to where you could train a stable diffusion model just off of just like a few pictures of yourself. So
Hmm.
basically, you find some old pictures of yourself, you upload them to an S3 bucket. You more or less say this is Daniel. I'm a male. You send it up there. It trains an algorithm, makes a custom endpoint for you, and then you could send it prompts to create images for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so my Slack profile picture
Ah.
at work is a generative AI picture I made of myself. And I do have to say that maybe that is something beneficial, because when people are contacting me for the first time, they're like, "Oh my goodness, like I love your picture," and a lot of people think it's real. And the prompt I used was, Daniel as a wizard from Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
And
nice.
so people think I'm this like super like cosplayer that like just dressed up within this like really ornate costume. And then a few people actually recognize that it was generative AI that made it. But so maybe that was fun, but it's also kind of makes you a little bit more recognizable, because people are like, "How did you do that?" And then you get to talk about, well,
Yeah.
hey, here's a GitHub repo where you could go do that. If anybody wants to make a Gen AI picture of yourself, let me know. I can get you the GitHub repo for it. It's publicly out there. I will warn you, SageMaker endpoints can get expensive, so like don't run it for more than a day. Like if you if you
Do your work.
if you do the cloud formation stack and you train it, like send it a few prompts and then like destroy the stack. I didn't, and then I ended up with a bill at the end of the month.
I would like to that. Can we link that on the video here on
Yeah,
YouTube?
yeah. I'll
Okay.
send you the link for it. You can see it's small, but I'll send you the bigger picture.
Oh, that's cool. And you're holding a staff.
Yeah,
Oh,
and the
that's
reason you know
nice.
it's generative
Long
AI,
hair too.
yeah, is there's 6 fingers, which is, if you look at it when you see the bigger
Oh.
picture, that's how you know it's done with generative AI. Stable Diffusion is better now, but at the time I think we were on Stable Diffusion 1.5, and it did not do a good job with hands. So there's 6 fingers.
It's a really cool use case. I've seen some other personal use cases that I've had. People have come talk to me. I think images is definitely a big one. I've seen some cool animations with it as well that people have made shorts with it. I don't know how they did it. I'm sure it was some custom use. Maybe SageMaker was involved. I'd like to probably learn a little bit more about that, where they're generating shorts all the way
Hmm.
through. Um, so that's certainly exciting, and yeah, really really grateful that you came here today, Daniel, to chat with me and talk about healthcare, about career, about Amazon, about generative AI in general, and Magical and training and the classes that we have. And maybe one day you interview somebody, and if you hire them, I'll send you a text. Hey, this person, got training with us, and it looks like he's working there on maybe not directly with you, but if maybe that, but also like anywhere in AWS. So looking forward to the day where I'll send you that text as well, where we're continuing to grow as a company, and also trying to share the importance of training, the importance of studying, right? The importance of learning
Yeah,
with our customers as well, the importance um, of seeking that as well, because I think a lot of people that are at that place where they made that decision that they do want a career switch, that they do want to work in a different field, um, the sense of feeling lost, not knowing where to start, is real,
yeah,
right? Is very real. Some people come talk to us, and that's the most important thing that they hear is like, yes, there is a path, right? Like we can help you in that path, and AWS also has a lot of resources, has a lot of really really well defined paths as well, the certifications being one of them. I think that's a really great path to start with. Throw in some projects in there like we talked about. I think that's a really great way for a person to get into this career. And there, we talked about this as well, it's not just software engineers, right? There's
yeah.
so many positions that a person can get to, that those certifications can help. And having a good clean repository with maybe, or multiple repositories with a couple projects in there that can be looked at, very important as well. um, Anything else that you'd like to to
Yeah, I would just
mention?
say, I'm the solutions architect, so I probably like you're like talked a lot about that, but we have cloud support engineers, we have technical account managers, we
Mm-hmm.
have, even our salespeople need to have technical backgrounds. We have what are called client success managers. So like if you really like doing project management, that's a great, career field. We're really big at AWS around career choice and like
Mm-hmm.
letting you grow and like move around. So, we have people, there's not on my direct team, but there's a solutions architect on one of our other nonprofit teams. who started out, working in the warehouse, and then there was like a program, and like I think it was just a period of about 4 years, became a solutions architect, which is a huge like career trajectory. I know we were looking at one of the job postings earlier to kind of give an idea of what the ranges are that like solutions architects can make. But like if you're going from the warehouse jobs, which I think what are they, like $20 an hour now? I don't know exactly what they start at, but to like what a solutions architect makes, if you think about like growing that amount just like in that short period of time, there's so much room for growth in those areas. So if you have that like thirst to learn, like if you're looking entry level, where people start as these like cloud support engineers, like they can move from that to be like technical account managers, and there's a lot of TAMs that move on to be solutions architects, and solutions architects go on to be product managers and things like that. So
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I do want to mention those here explicitly. So the position that Daniel's talking about, I'm looking just on the Amazon.jobs website here, and this is a senior solutions architect. And this particular one is in Colorado, but I believe that salary range is, Arizona is a similar as well.
Yeah, we're the same.
And the range for this position here, I'm just reading strictly from the Amazon website, $122,000 to $239,000. So there's a bit of a range there,
but I think it's important to call out, that's just the base salary. So whenever we have ownership, is again one of the Amazon leadership principles. As part of that ownership leadership principle, we believe that our employees should be owners of the company as well. So a significant part of our compensation is done through what are called RSUs, which are restricted stock units. Those have if you get hired, they have like a 4-year vesting period, which is very far backloaded. So to make up for that, you get a signing bonus for your first 2 years to kind of like make you whole until those vesting schedules happen. So that's the base pay. Like you would fall somewhere in that. You'd also be given stock awards, and you'd be given a sign-on bonus that would be delivered over the first 2 years of your employment as well. And then each year you can get additional stock grants.
And that the stock grants, is that what the yearly bonus would be, the performance bonus, or is there another?
We do not
layer?
do performance bonuses.
Okay, all right. So
at least not for my role, right? The role that we're in, it's intentional. So even though we're part of the sales team, we do not want our solutions architects to be financially motivated to oversell to customers. We want them to sell the service that's appropriate to solve their problem. If I could make more money by like selling a customer like a higher tier of storage than they needed, or sell them like an instance type that was maybe overpowered for their what the business problem they were trying to solve, then that would lose trust with the customer. So it's intentional that solutions architects are not compensated on customer spend. We are, in fact, like if my SAs saved a customer money, like I'm going to be like, great job, solutions architect. You found a way to save our customers some money. The salespeople don't necessarily like that because they are commission based. We do have some like very like what you consider minor bonus types of things. We have like an awards like thing where managers can give gift cards. It's like there are points that people can buy gift cards with. So like you can spend them on whatever you want to. Those are just some way for us to give ad hoc acknowledgement to people on our team or to anybody inside of Amazon. I can send those points and people can give gift cards. My org do not do any type of like performance bonuses, but if you like do well in your role, like you could usually expect to get a higher stock award, that will over for the next year.
Wonderful. Oh, this was really awesome. Really great conversation, Daniel. I really appreciate you taking the time here. We're still learning as well. So, if there's anything that come up later that you want us to include, we'll have the description down here for you and everything. So thank you.
If anybody wants to know more, you can find me on LinkedIn. I will gladly respond to your message, talk to you if you want to know any more about the leadership principles, what it's like to interview. We can talk about the STAR method for answering questions. Yes, be happy to reach anybody who wants to learn more. Like I can tell you anything I am legally allowed to tell you.
Thank you, Danny. Really appreciate it.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, guys.